Amalele wardantala wezamalele nano wezamalele nano amalele bontuntala wezamalele nano wezamalele nano amalele wardantala wezamalele nano wezamalele nano شجع ترمبولي ويا دخيوان بولي يانا يانا شجع يانا يانا ويوجن بيا بونا عجبت بشانو ما وردان تهلا ويأدين وان جيراني ويأدين وان جيراني بشانو ما بونتون تهلا ويأدين وان جيراني ويأدين وان جيراني جالة تكو ما بونتون تهلا وقلبي ما هيراني وقلبي ما هيراني شكاترم بولي ويا دخيوان بولي يانا يانا شكا يانا يانا ويوجن بيا بونا عجبات Oiru tanya kutu wardantala Wina nauni ntura Wina nauni ntura Eiru tanya kutu bontuntala Wina nauni ntura Wina nauni ntura Afana somana wardantala Sidungaduni ntura Sidungaduni ntura ترمبولي شكا ترمبولي ويا دخيوان بولي يانا يانا شكا يانا يانا ويوجن بيا بونا ودربونا بونتون تالا والقلوكي بنا والقلوكي بنا خد ودربونا بونتون تالا والقلوكي بنا والقلوكي بنا نولد daima bontun dala wai walu gudi banna wai walu gudi banna turum bulle shaka turum bulle wai ada khewan bulle yana yana shaka yana wai wajin biya yene uneshi shaka yene uneshi we man mai nakashi turum bulle shaka turum bulle we ada khewan bulle yana yana shaka yana we wajibiya.
Greetings, my people. This is the Minority Report on Report FM, which forever now, or since last July, has been coming to you live via radio. I am the host, Dawit Kebede, and we've been doing this successfully for a year now. And I am thankful for Reboot FM. I'm thankful for everybody, producers Noemi and others who've helped. But it's time to take the further step and go live. And today, when we go live and live stream this, I have come up with a very interesting issue for all you all. If you're the regular listener of the show, you will realize that much of the time what we talk about is migration, being a minority, what it means to go out of where you come from to live in another place. And it has been my experience, and I've had so many people, wonderful people, talk on the show. This time, I would like to turn the notch a bit, as they say, and invited a good friend of mine. The show is called um, The Wandering Ethiopians, Migration and the Ethiopia Within Us. And we will talk about the two of us who have migrated from our country somewhere else. We talk about experience, we talk about what accomplishment is, and we talk about why we have a nagging feeling that should we be successful, we are forever looking back instead of living our lives to the front. To this effect, I invite my good friend, a former university mate, and an accomplished economist by the name of Dawit Kebede. Welcome, sir. An applied economist, an accomplished data scientist who's having a well to do life in Madison, the state of Wisconsin, in the United States. And I would like to welcome this fantastic gentleman to this show for the first time being live streamed. Dave,
Thank you for having me, Fatawi.
what
Thank
it
you.
is, bro. It's
Yeah.
nice to have you here.
Yeah.
So today we're gonna chat about stuff that we are both in common have talked for a long time, but it requires, as they say, the light of the air. And I wanted to talk about accomplishment. So who is Dawit Kebede? Or Dr. Dawit Kebede? Who is he?
Oh, so that's where do I start for that? Like, so Dawid is
Well, let's start from university.
grew up in Addis Ababa, and lived there for 18 years. Uh, Before going to Alamaya for a university degree, a place where you and I met, and with other, with our best friends. And then after that, I've been moving from place to place. After Alamaya, I went to Europe, and then back to Ethiopia again. Stayed there like for 3 years, and then it's been 8 years since I moved out of Ethiopia, and here I am in Madison now. I spend most of my time like in school, and and then also working in academic institution and research institutions, and then finally now I am working in the private sector. So it's like you could say, like, I sold my soul to the devil. So
Oh no, sir.
finally, yeah.
You've you've paid your dues and now you're receiving your dues, I believe.
Yeah, some people say that, like a friend. I remember, like, when I was in, last year of grad school. Um, so, like some of us were thinking about, like, hey, like, going to a private industry, and then none of them were like, actively looking for it. And then suddenly, um, a recruiter at Amazon contacted me, and then like I applied and I told them in our lab meeting, and then she was like, "Oh my God, Dawit, you sold to the devil. We were going to go and then solve world poverty and then help design policies." So yeah,
Mhm.
that's why I say so. That in
Yeah,
a nutshell, that's who I am. So
yeah. So, what is the journey from a school which taught you agricultural economics to what it is you are, which is a data scientist and a software writer, programmer, and so and so? Because that is quite, I don't know how big of a leap it is. You'll kind of have to explain it to me, but it literally is the science of the 21st century, right?
well, so just to give you a context, so like I so my PhD was in agricultural and applied economics, but like my major was not agricultural economics. So I specialized in in development economics, but within that, like I focus mainly in microeconometric approach. So it's basically
Mhm.
like looking at uh, it could be a policy problem or a business problem, but you use data, and then you use like econometric models like to find
Mhm.
answers or solve problems. So that's
Mhm.
the main gist of it. So that tool can be applied in agriculture, it could be applied in industry, it could be applied in any other area where you can explain when you have a theory, and then data to back up that theory, and then test your theory using data. So
Mhm.
right now, what I'm doing is I'm just basically applying all those tools, but
Mhm.
and in the business world. So it's basically optimizing uh, uh, you know uh, different business areas. So it could be optimizing cost or revenue, or it could be any problem that
Mhm.
that's at hand. But you basically use
Mhm.
the same tools, but the title could be different when you from one sector to a different sector. So yeah, but yeah, by training I'm an applied economist. That's all I could say.
Yeah. Now, this is the Dawit Kebede, or as I affectionately call you, that is the Dr. Dawit Kebede abroad. Now, let's talk the within us, the home within us that is part of the show. Perspective is a hell of a thing because once you live outside, you are, at least if you are like me, you're forever comparing where we come from and where we have been and seeing what gaps there are in policy, institutions, everything, right? Um, Before we go there, let's look at this personal view of, yeah, compared to where I come from. Is there anything that strikes you as hilarious or humorous in any way? Let me give you an
um
example. I could give you an
yeah
example. The first thing that really cracked me up was the fact that when I went to the first place I went to, which was the south of Germany, the fact that the buses
Mhm.
came on time without fault used to crack me up.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that the trains came
well
without fault used to crack me up.
well that okay, so it's good that you laugh at you. I mean, it cracked you up, but like, yeah, that's really an impressive thing. But like, um it wouldn't, I don't know what would be funny, because like that would not be something that I would characterize as really humorous. um but
It's not.
like,
It is a
usually
helpless
like
man's
that
understanding
kind of,
of.
yeah.
It is
Okay.
not funny. I
uh
know.
Yeah, I mean, like, but here is all I can say. I mean, usually, like, it's very hard, like, to come up with examples when you're like put on a spot like that. But I think, like, it's really human nature, like, to compare like different places whenever you are moving from place to place, like, be it, within the country, or where moving continents, or like, or across countries. I think it's
Mhm.
really, really common. Um, and I think especially Ethiopians, like, they have been doing it. since the early 20th century, like when Ethiopian students start going abroad and then coming back, everybody is always like comparing like those things. I
Yeah.
don't think that I'll be able to do anything new. Maybe we'll just go deeper if you have like specific questions in terms of
Yeah.
what the differences, the similarities, and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but like so that's what I don't know. It's really
Yeah. Cool.
I don't
With
remember
this,
anything
we're gonna go
really
to, yeah,
right now.
we're gonna dig
Oh,
deeper, much deeper in this after the first song. I just wanted to start the show on a light heart. This is the first ever show, and as you know, the
yeah,
audiences, if there are any looking at us right now, would like to have us, at least if they are a sense of humor, you would like to know what the hell it is that is what the show is about. We start with a
yeah,
humorous front, and then we dig deep into it. This is the Minority Report on Reboot FM. We're gonna go to a song, which is another one from old school Ethiopia. I hope you stay tuned to us to watch another 45 minutes of this glorious interview with Dawit Kebede. Have a good one.
እንደው አይጠፋም ይነጋል ይመሻል ይነጋል ይመሻል ስለ መውደድ ነገር ብስጭት ምን ያሻል ብስጭት ምን ያሻል የኔ ልብ ሞኝ ነው አጥፊውን ይመርጣል አጥፊውን ይመርጣል ጊዜ ከተገኘ መውደድ መች ይታጣል መውደድ መች ይታጣል ጆሮ ብቻ አይደለም ልብ ማለት ሰሜው የትም ቦታ ቢሆን ጊዜ ነው ጠቃሚው ጊዜ ነው ጠቃሚው ጊዜ ከተገኘ የህይወት ብልጭታ የህይወት ብልጭታ መውደድ አሞራ ነው ያርፋል የትም ቦታ ያርፋል የትም ቦታ ማድረግ አይገባም ቸኩሎ ኑዛዜ ቸኩሎ ኑዛዜ መወደድ ላይ ጠፋ ከተገኘ ጊዜ ከተገኘ ጊዜ ጆሮ ብቻ አይደለም ልብ ማለት ሰቤው የትም ቦታ ቢሆን ጊዜ ነው ጠቃሚው ጊዜ ነው ጠቃሚው ጆሮ ብቻ አይደለም ልብ ማለት
Right, that was another classic from Bahta Gabrayewat called Gize, which translates to time, time that has passed between me and my friend and my guest, Dr. Dawit Kebede. 20 years ago, we both went to a university, and 20 years later, we see each other in different places. And so, to my friend Dawit Kebede, I have this question. And I've heard it not just from you, but from others as well. After this sense of accomplishment, right? Where you are, you with the life you built, everything else. We've talked about this sense of if only I could get the chance, I could do a lot more good where I come from than here. Or if only I was given a meritocratic or an openness that I get here, I would do such wonderful things where I come back from. Can you talk to me about that?
Oof, that's a tough one.
Okay.
Because it's not just the individual. Whenever like you are talking about what you are doing in one place, it's not
Mm-hmm.
just explained by what you know and but what you can do, but
Mm-hmm.
it involves a lot of factors like environmental factors. So even so when you are talking about like when we're talking about how productive you are in whatever you do or wherever you are, there has to be
Mm-hmm.
some sort of like matching. So what you do and if it is like an institution, are you matched to the best institution that is going to exploit what you have?
Mm-hmm.
If that institution is located in a good environment, that's going to provide, or who's that's going to provide the goods and the services, whatever they are, is going to be
Mm-hmm.
used by the community surrounding it. So it is there are a lot of factors that are involved. So you cannot. It's very hard to say that whatever you are doing in Ethiopia with that same person will be able to do all those things if they come here because it would be different environment. And the same
Yeah.
is true, if you are moved back home. So different
Yeah.
environment. So you have to use whatever you have, like to you can't change the environment, so you adjust yourself to the environment to get to deliver whatever you can. So that's
Okay.
why usually I don't think about saying, oh, if I go back, I'll do this, or if because it's a different thing, and then you have to find out. You can't do whatever you are doing here in a different
Okay.
place, in a different
Then then
environment. As it.
then okay. Then let's limit this. Then let's limit it because we have to into functional institutions, be it academic or political, and what it is required for them to work. Right. Let's say an accomplished data scientist or an economist in Ethiopia. What would be the environment needed? Is it an environment, for example, as a teacher, if you were to teach back home? What you would need is not just an institution that you go and teach, but not just materials, but an institution of openness, right?
So
So
let's just
let's
talk
then,
about so, um, so what an individual can do, right? So
yeah.
uh, So if you go back to Ethiopia with all the skill sets that you have, you would be able, to employ those things. So for let's say there are a lot of researchers in Ethiopia right now. They do a lot of impressive work. Um,
Mhm.
it's still like they're producing impressive research. So it's still like it's still possible they do that. It's really nice. The difference being here there is if there any an entity that would use that research and put it into practice, right?
Mm.
uh, yes, to some extent sometimes it happens, but usually when we
Mhm.
are talking about like in Ethiopia, like the relationship between research and industry in the private sector,
Mhm.
or research and
Mhm.
policy like in government areas, uh,
Mhm.
everybody talks about it, but the
Mhm.
problem is like the framework is not there like to fully utilize these resources. So
Mhm.
yes, it is possible to do that. And yes, there are
Mhm.
like some initiatives in some areas. For example, like the state sometimes establishes like a semi-autonomous research institute to conduct
Mhm.
different research in different areas. um,
Mhm.
so sometimes you see some positive things. So
Mhm.
an individual, um, you know, an individual can contribute to that, whether they are in country or here. So, for example, I can give you the Ethiopian Development Research Institute that houses different research institutes within it. For example, when I was there is the International Food Policy Research Institute, the Ethiopian Strategy Support System. So somehow that has a very strong connection with the state, and they work closely with them. But there were also other research institutes within that house, that sometimes do independent research just for publication, but sometimes there will be forums, and then they will just present their results for policymakers. But it's not like um, uh, an institutionalized relationship with that institute. Okay, so like it has to go beyond coming to seminars and workshops and listening and then leaving. Okay, so there has to be that close working relationship, and also utilization of research outputs by policymakers from these institutes. What people in that institute or Ethiopians abroad can do is collaborate with those institutes in new knowledge production and new knowledge generation. So yes, there are, and then I can say similar things about the Agricultural Transformation Agency that's really supporting the agriculture sector. But these are like small steps, and I would like that to grow and then become to a very solid relationship, something that is really complementary uh, uh, for policy implementation or policy design. Okay.
Mhm.
But right now, when I was explaining before that uh, a person by itself may not be sufficient. There must be an environment that uses that resources. This is what I'm talking about. And when we are talking in Ethiopia, I think when you are doing inter uh, country comparison, we have like that tends to be weak sometimes in Ethiopia. And in some cases, actually, it's adversarial relationship between policymakers and people who produce knowledge, or research institutions or professional associations. So that needs to be improved. But I think at an individual level, like people continue doing this. I know a lot of friends who still do research in Ethiopia. Sometimes I used to meet them in different conferences. At individual level, people collaborate. That relationship is there between the diaspora and local researchers. So that relationship is really there, and I think and that's really good. But that's really at individual level.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but the
can I ask?
intent should be there for
Yeah.
researchers to utilize the knowledge that is produced.
Hmm. Can I ask you this? Is research and research output and those who do research in Ethiopia too politicized? In other words, what I've learned in this part of the world is academia is so free, it has at times told the governments to F off when it comes to finding
So,
what credible information is. But in
so are you
Ethiopia, as you
asking me
say,
if the research by itself is politicized and is not really objective, or are you asking me if the government is politicizing uh, the output of the research, which
a
is really
researcher,
objective? Which one is it?
yeah, so a researcher looks for a topic, go on researching this topic, finds about it,
Yeah.
displays the information. But because there is a politics that is formed in such a way, everything that is not timed to fit it is considered as an anathema and always pushed out one way or another, right? In other words, in a state of academia driving policy, which government should use as a tool, it's government that makes policy and then looking for research that fits it.
You're more looking for validation. Okay. Yeah, that is true. Well, I mean, this would be a good example for this would be, I guess, the Ethiopian Economic Association during the 2005 election era or immediately before it. So the association has a research wing that produces like an objective research on questions that may be sensitive politically, but that's not the entire work of the institute. Okay, there is the Ethiopian Economic Policy Research Institute. So, but I think right before 2005 election, they did this research on land tenure, and what was a really sensitive topic in Ethiopia. But the institute, the Economic Policy Research Institute, has like different divisions. They have macro division, they have human capital, and also health, um, like industry and trade. Different region. They produce a lot of research output, but because of that, research on land tenure, and in the subsequent election, that research was used as one of the economic policies of the opposition, and many of the researchers there actually formed an opposition group. The government not only like saw the people involved in this research in the opposition, but it viewed the entire association as its enemy. Okay, and then prevented like objective research even in areas that are relevant for even policies advocated by the state itself. So I remember uh, the struggle that the association has to go through to renew licenses, going without licenses sometimes in closed, being close to being closed, privately lobbying some authorities who really understand about what the economic association is about to extend the license. But I remember like the struggle um, until I think like well, last time I was there, like until 2016, I watched it like closely.
Wow.
So you can see this is
Wow.
a good example of politicizing research and
Mhm.
politicizing output uh, conducted by professional associations. That's really bad. It's a huge disincentive. I mean, I really appreciate a lot of researchers who really struggled through this, but it's
Mhm.
really, I mean, like it disincentivizes young professionals. It prevents
Yeah.
them, being interested in the area, and also people who are already working. Uh, it prevents them from producing more or doing more,
Yeah.
because that's a huge disincentive.
Yeah.
Um,
But isn't that the case? You just talked about it, right? Somebody who's educated in a profession that is supposed to do research and look at numbers to identify facts that are relevant to the country. And a government saying, okay, listen, this does not adhere to what we want to hear. Isn't that what
mhm.
is taking much of the intellectual capital of the country abroad, which one way or another will become successful? And yet, when the time comes that they are able enough to want to contribute, they still have to go through an archaic political system that is not divorced from intellect. Intellectual output one way, political output another, and political output being informed first and foremost by academia. Why is it? I remember
Yeah,
growing up at Sabah University being the hotbed of opposition, right?
yeah.
Opposition of academic freedom and everything else.
I think the main problem. I think this thing is. I've seen. I also see this right now. The main problem of our politicians in general is they see themselves not just as leaders, but they see themselves as also like intellectual powerhouse of the country. So they just don't want to govern, and they just don't want to lead. They also want to be thought leaders. I think that's a huge problem, and we've seen this like on Prime Minister Mallas Zenawi.
What do you mean by a
I
thought leader?
know that a lot of people appreciate him. What?
Hmm. You said thought
But
leaders.
yeah, they want to be like thought leaders in every area. They want to be thought leaders in agricultural development, in industry, in education, in health, in everything, which is
Okay.
really impossible.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
you can't explain everything. You have to rely on those who really know the subject
Yeah.
matter, who really spend time researching and investigating this stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not
Expertise.
what's happening. So that's where I think the disconnect and the conflict comes, because whenever someone who spent a lot of time on a given topic and provides uh, a research output that may be contrary to what the state says, then that I think they sometimes they take it personal. It's not like even among researchers, like there could be this, right? Like someone worked on an issue and publishes a result, but another person working on the same topic could come up with a different result that negates the first popular person. But that they work it out through the peer review system and the seminars and everything, right? So
Yeah.
that could have
Yeah.
happened among people working in the same field. Okay,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you if you just shut yourself down to not accept anything that different
Yeah.
from you, which is what's
Yeah.
happening from
Yeah.
our by our policymakers, like they shouldn't even have that position to begin with, then that's
Yeah.
when the problem is. So
Yeah.
and right now I think I also see that tendency that like leaders trying to be they like to lecture on each policy as
Yeah.
if they spent years and years working on them, which I
Yeah.
think is a problem. Um, Leaders are needed for decision making. Leaders are needed for their sharp insight to listen to different opinions and make the best decisions given the best information available. That's the kind of skill that we want in leaders, right?
Yeah.
We don't want them um, to appear. I mean, we know they're not intellectual. They appear to be knowledgeable
Well,
about
that's
all
an
the issues.
embarrassing.
That's
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know who they are deceiving. Them, I know the first person they are deceiving is themselves,
Yeah.
and then maybe like a lot of people who may not understand this. So that should stop.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Yeah. But here lies the question, and this one is important to both of us, I think. Do you not believe that we have a culture in Ethiopia where a regime, a person in power, a status quo, somebody is supposed to solve all our problems? Have we not culturally inherited a ruler and the ruled, and therefore the ruler is supposed to think for us, do whatever is needed, solve every crime? Isn't that also our own fault in terms of our own intellectual, let's say, fallibility, where we've always been governed because we thought they're supposed to govern everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, like you have a point. I mean, um, yes, like I mean, you could just yeah, you are right. Like people always. This is not just about the government. We always. Shouldn't say they. We always like to shout on the standing on the fence instead of just getting inside and then getting involved. Um, And that's a problem. And you can see that, like, people complaining about the state, people complaining about opposition parties, and instead of just, joining in and then maybe trying to be uh, part of the solution instead of just, pointing things out from outside. But like for the first thing that you said, hey, government, do this for us or do that for us. That's also history, right? Because the state wanted to be the sole provider of like everything. So they want to view themselves as, the providers of social services, which is really, their job, but they would like to be the engine of the economy. They would like to be providers of everything, from the imperial times, like even, up to recently. Whenever people try to do something on their own, sometimes, if that's in conflict with the state, people, they intervene with them, right? So ordinary people look at that. So, and then they say, oh, if the government doesn't do this, then we have no solution. So the only option we have is just to shout and asking for solutions. So you could see this like also like an indigenous problem when it's created partly by the state, but I think it's a problem that we found ourselves to to get out of this situation. Yes, we
In
have
other words,
to
we have to break
be
the habit.
and then take matters into our hand, and then sometimes solve issues on our own. All right.
Yeah.
You have an environment that's really not clean, and you stand up and then clean it. Defend your neighborhood, and if the state is not allowing you to defend it, then maybe just fight for that right.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we should sometimes we resist. We are afraid from doing that because of, again, history. Whenever we try to do that, there are consequences. So we are afraid of them. So we always we restrict
Yeah.
ourselves, asking all the time, asking instead of being engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation we're having. Yeah. This is a fascinating conversation that we're having. We'll continue doing this, but we're going to take a break with a little bit of song that we have for you. This is the Minority Report on Reboot FM with my good friend Dr. Dawit Kebede. I'm your host, Dawit Kebede, and we're going to get back after this song. Thank you for being with us.
ትናንትናን ጥሶ ዛሬን ተንተርሶ ነገንም ተውሶን አምናንም አድሶ ይመጣል ትዝታሽ ጓዞን አግበስብሶ ይመጣል ትዝታሽ ጓዞን አግበስብሶ ፍቅርንስ ሸኘሁት ወጥቼ እስከ ደጅ መውደድን ሸኘሁት ወጥቼ እስከ ደጅ ማባረሪያ አቃተኝ ትዝታ ነው እንጂ ማባረሪያ አቃተኝ ትዝታ ነው እንጂ ለጎን ሲሆን ፍቅር ነው ደስታ አበሳ አስቆጣሪው የተለዩ ለታ አልገባኝም እኔ ምንድነው ትዝታ አልገባኝም እኔ ምንድነው ትዝታ ትዝታን ዋሎን የሐሳብ መርከቡ ትዝታን ዋሎን የጭንቀት መርከቡ ማራገፊያውማ እኔ ነኝ ወደቡ ማራገፊያውማ እኔ ነኝ ወደቡ ባጠረን ዕድሜ ፍቅር መዝገበ ቃላቱ ትዝታ ባይኖር የትዝታ እንዳገት ወጣሁት ተክዤ የትዝታ እንዳገት ወጣሁት ተክዤ በእጄ ምናምኑን በልቤ አንቺን ይዤ በእጄ ምናምኑን በልቤ አንቺን ይዤ የምትራመዱን እንደተመቻችሁ አጭር ትዝታ ያልደረሰባችሁ እስቲ አውሱኝ ለኔ ደህና ልብ ያላችሁ እስቲ አውሱኝ ለኔ ደህና ልብ ያላችሁ በልቼ ርቦኛል ጠጥቼ ጠምቶኛል።
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back at it again. This is the Reboot FM show, the Minority Report, coming to you live from Berlin on 88.4 megahertz and in Potsdam in 90.7 megahertz. Today we're having a fantastic conversation about the wandering Ethiopians. That is, Ethiopians that are abroad, like myself and a lot of my good friends. And we have been chatting today with a very wonderful guest of mine and a former schoolmate of mine, Dawit Kebede, or Dr. Dawit Kebede. And we just stopped having a conversation about regimes and our cultural affliction to say yes to a regime and yes to whatever a regime can do until we've had enough of it. So let's talk about the current one. We could talk about the past, but time won't be enough to do it. So let's talk about what's happening, the dynamics of what we have in Ethiopia. We have a regime, a new one. We have what the Germans call a minister president chancellor, which is a prime minister, who has won a Nobel Peace Prize on his ascension. We have, at least as I understood it earlier, a lot of liberalizing reform. Today we're going to focus on economics as you are as a student of it. What is the deal with our country? What is it? How is it going? How would you say? What's happening? Or let me put it this way. Let me go question by question. Do we have a functional state?
I think we do. There are a lot of really good signs regarding like the change, but there are also very terrible things happening right now. And why are those terrible things happening? I don't think it's because like we have a state that's not functional or a state that's not able to function its duty. I think it's the unwillingness of the state in some cases to actively, do its duty of protecting and securing citizens' life and property. But I don't think that is because of inability. I think it's because of unwillingness. Because we have seen the state's, ability when it wants to, like it moves really in a speedy fashion in some areas, like to contain what they consider as violence, but they fail to do that in some areas. So I think, like ability is not the question. So you can't say, so we cannot talk about, like a state failure, because that's just, by definition is like inability to enforce laws and rules within the country. But in our case, I think that's not the case. But the state has actually failed in some of its citizens in terms of protecting their life and then property, and that is really a problem. So I don't know why that's happening.
Mhm.
It's really appalling. I don't want
Mhm.
to speculate, but it's really a sad state.
Mhm.
Despite the fact that we have rhetorically, it looks like we have some good things going
Mhm.
at least on a level, on a promissory not level.
Mhm. So we have a functional state, and it can function. Its organs are intact, which means should it has the political will, it can function, is what we're saying.
That's my opinion.
Um,
Yes.
okay. Then is the body politic sick? Do you believe that the body politic is dysfunctional, or is it cannot come to what normally politics is supposed to do, which is the art of the possible, which is a compromised and achievable goals being left for fundamentalist ideology that essentially is just a means and an end in itself?
Oh, I mean, this is really a tough one. I think
Yeah,
it's just like the struggle that's happening right now between the different political forces is not of
yeah.
difference in ideology, in my opinion. Although they say it is
Hmm.
purely, it's just like a pure power struggle.
Yeah,
It's not like they are you know using that ideology because like if you go in detail, think, okay, what they say and what's on the ground, those are two different
hmm,
things. Okay, so
yeah,
for example, you can see what how they are divided. Some of them, they call themselves as federalists, but they are not federalists in reality, and they
mm,
accuse the other group as unitarist. They are not.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we always
So there
talk
is that.
about compromise, everything, but for compromise to be there, like there needs to be uh, a willingness for an honest discussion based on facts, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's not happening. Some of them, they don't want those facts actually, because like without their lies, or without their opinion that is really
yeah,
grounded on falsehood, they have nothing.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't think they would be willing to negotiate or to come to an honest table
yeah,
to have a discussion. So
yeah,
it's just a grandstanding.
yeah. So what you're saying is don't let facts get in the way of a good story, so long as the story leads to you getting power.
Not me. That's what they are saying.
That's
Not
what's
me.
happening. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then
But
let
I
me
just
talk
give
to you
you an
about this.
example. But this is really it concerns like most of, even like the state has also this problem.
Yeah. Okay, then talk to me about this. What is our economy? What is it? Like, what is it that we thrive at? As in, I know we are forever have we been told that we are an agriculturally development-led economy. But it seems that much of the population works in it, much of the population does it. It's a livelihood, as we say. It's something you do and it's something you live in, everything else. But it hasn't moved an inch. So what is the economic idea or theory that drives Ethiopia? Do we have one? Especially so what I'm talking about is, does the new regime have one? Because it's the new regime that we're all interested in now.
Yeah, I mean, like the state every 5 years comes with a plan that is
Hmm.
believed to be the guiding principle of economic policy, and then has changes from time to time. As you said,
Hmm.
it started from being agricultural focused, and then with the transformation, uh, they focused on transforming to be a manufacturing powerhouse by some target year. Um,
Hmm.
but so if you ask me, okay, whenever we talk about the economy, then we have to start discussing from those policy documents. So,
Yeah.
but I think right now, so they started with the homegrown policy, but then it's really, things are not clear right now. I mean, it's understandable that they introduced it with when they come to
Mhm.
power, even though they, technically speaking, we are on GTP 2, like the Growth and Transformation Plan 2, because with
Mhm.
they are elected with that. When they were elected, they designed that one, and then that was the guiding principle. And then they come with the homegrown policy. Now they are talking about privatization,
Mhm.
that is being contested, and it's really like things are not clear. But like we have to wait until election year, and then they have to be elected, and then whoever is elected should come up with a policy,
Yeah.
because they have to win first, like to have that legitimacy and design a
Yeah.
policy. So
Yeah.
right now, like there are a lot of questions being raised because they are just talking about privatization. This is a very old policy, uh, and I think uh, partly enforced by the IMF or in the World Bank, because I know in the negotiation for WTO accession, like a lot of member countries are also questioning about those, opening the finance sector and also opening the telecom and power sector for a long time.
Mhm.
Although most of the agreement on goods tariff for goods and services have been agreed upon, and our rates
Mhm.
are actually lower than what we are required to keep them at, although it's,
Mhm.
anyways, a lot of detail in there. So it looks like the state
Mhm.
is like, oh, okay, we will do it.
Mhm.
And they just say, okay, we will just open up uh, and then start privatizing, which I
Yeah.
think is being contested by a lot of people right now,
Yes.
and for very good reason. So
Mhm.
is it GTP 2 or is it the homegrown policy? Is it for how long is
Mhm.
it? Like it's really a murky situation right now.
Mhm.
Um,
So, in other
so
words,
hard to tell.
until elections are held and until a new power comes to office, we really don't have an idea of what our economic policy is going to be, or for that matter, the policy that drives the
Yeah,
economic engine of the country.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so you can say for like you can see, for example, some of the the ideas in the growth and transformation plan. Um,
Mhm.
some of the policies are knocked out. So let's say, for
Mhm.
example, one of the arguments in that document was because like our commercial banks usually do not provide long-term loans for that required for to establish a strong manufacturing industry. The state
Mhm.
would finance these through the development bank, but in order to do that, they required the private bankers to loan, I think,
Ah,
27% of their loan disbursement back to uh,
the National Bank.
the end, and that would be transferred, and that's supposed to fund these manufacturing firms. But
Ah,
that's the
okay.
implementation of this is an idea. The implementation of it was really botched because there is corruption and theft, and then it's not done the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah,
So when like this thing is knocked down right now, right?
yeah.
For
Can,
again,
can I ask
it
this?
makes sense because
Yeah.
you a policy by itself is not really going to do you anything. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's like
Yeah.
building a house. So you have an architect designs it, and then you have an engineer that makes sure like structurally the building is going to really stand. All right.
Yeah.
And then you have electricians and plumbers and everything, right? Everything could be really perfect, but if the plumber messes up and then there is a leak, the building is going to go down,
That's fine. Yeah, that's true.
right? So that's
Then
why, like, whenever,
yeah,
yeah, by the
let
way,
me
this
ask you this.
analogy actually is
Yeah,
something, a very good analogy provided by Esther Duflo in one of her lectures at the association.
the
So
Nobel Prize
I'm
winner.
just
Yeah,
taking her analogy, so it's not mine.
yeah. Okay. Then let me ask you this wish, and then we can close it. What is your wish for the economy of the Ethiopia to become? Far more liberal, far more conservative, or more opened up, less opened up, more dynamism?
I want it to be so I want the private sectors to I want the restriction on the private sector that has been in place to be lifted up. That's one thing. I want the like all the restrictions like credit or even political restrictions sometimes because of some political
to be
views. There
lifted.
are a lot of restrictions. I want the private sector to practice free, but I'm not also saying that we have to liberalize everything. I'm not for that. There should be a good mix of state and private sector. Everybody has a role to play, a positive role to play in lifting the economy without compromising one another. So that's the kind of thing that I want. The state supports the private sector, and the private sector, and indirectly would by its growth would benefit the country, because of like large revenue base and such an employment and the other things.
Okay.
So that's just an overall.
Thank you, Dr. Dawit. This has been a fascinating conversation. This has been a presentation of the Minority Report on Reboot FM. I hope you liked our conversation on radio and on this stream. We'll leave you with this song and promise to come back with more fascinating conversations in this. Thank you for staying with us, and have a good sunny Sunday and the rest of weekend. Have a good one. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.
كي حسمكي اترب معدو قريب كواز الشاقل بقى ندلقو كتمت سبزيد اللق وبوتا كحنك غاكي حقي فكي عباب دكمتو ندلقو